The Entrepreneur MBA Podcast purpose is to help existing business owners grow their companies past the 10 million in revenue per year benchmark. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik, and I am co-founder and managing partner of Financing Solutions. Financing Solutions is a leading provider of lines of credit to small businesses that are fast, easy, and inexpensive to get. If you would like to learn more about our line of credit program, please visit us at www.fscreditline.com or give us a call at 862-307-4118. On a personal level, I have a 25-year career of building 7 companies. These companies have been in the up to $20 million in yearly revenue range and have achieved the Inc. 500 fastest growing list. I have the privilege to speak with business owners on a daily basis. If you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend, and please subscribe to us on your favorite podcasting app so you can hear future podcasts. Today, I am excited to be speaking with Cameron Herold, best-selling author and the founder of the COO Alliance. Cameron has been a leader for the past 25 years in helping companies achieve unbelievable growth. The COO Alliance is the world's leading network for second-in-commands, and Cameron has written several books, including The Vivid Vision, Free PR, Double Double, Meetings Suck, and The Miracle Mornings for Entrepreneurs. I don't know if Cameron realizes this, but I first met Cameron in 2007 at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I was starting a 3-year executive entrepreneurial program sponsored by Inc. magazine, the Entrepreneur Organization, and MIT for 50 of the fastest growing companies in the US. It was called Birthing of Giants, and it was a 1-week intensive program for 3 years that would dive into the best practices of building your business. They didn't actually bring in academics into our lectures. They would bring in people who actually had done big things in business. In fact, I know Cameron remembers, but one time they brought in an academic and we basically ran the guy out of the room. And we said to the person who was running the Birthing of Giants, don't ever bring in an academic again. So these were very, very successful people. That's where I met Cameron. Now, Cameron at the time, I just don't remember. Were you there as a speaker or did you come as someone to actually learn? Because you came every year for 3 years.
It's funny that you say that you're not sure if I remember. I remember where you were sitting, Stephen. Yeah. You guys were one of, I've been now to MIT, to Endicott House every single year since 2007. I've only missed one. Some years I've been twice. I've worked with every single class, and yours was the first class. So what happened was it's now called the Entrepreneurial Masters Program. It's a joint program between the Entrepreneurs Organization and MIT or MIT Labs. And I was asked to come and speak at it. And I had never been able to get into the Birthing of Giants program. When I was an EO member, I never qualified or I never actually got accepted. So my criteria for me speaking was I would love to come and speak, but I really want to be there for the entire 4 days. So I'll come and speak if you let me do that. And they said yes. So I got to sit as kind of an entrepreneur in residence through that 4 days. And they really liked it and I loved it. And they asked me to speak in the second year. So I came in the second year and I did it again for 4 days. And then they asked me to speak again in the third year. I'm the only speaker in history to speak to all 3 years of any of the MIT classes. And it was, so I know I've got so many good friends from your class, like Josh Burnett and Lee Prosenjek and Razor Suleiman and Sebastian Tondur and God, the list goes on and on. Arnaud Grobert, Kendra, you guys had the special something class of the 25 years at MIT.
Wow, it's amazing you say those names too, because I'm actually not that great with names. And I remember all those guys. I just visualized all their faces when you said that. The thing that's kind of weird was that I kept trying for the 20 years. I've kept trying, and I kind of actually gave up a little bit, getting into the next phase, which is gathering the Titans.
Yeah.
And I kind of threw up my hands. I really struggled. I couldn't get into it. But you know what all of our listeners here should know is that if you don't know about the Entrepreneur Organization, it's definitely something you should look into. The Entrepreneur Organization has been around for over 30 years, and it's specifically made up to help entrepreneurs and support them in growing their businesses and also handling the personal challenges that occur in your life due to owning a business. So, the resources they have is totally amazing, and you're put in a support group, and I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's also it's so fun to actually, once you meet all these people, to stay connected with them too. I had dinner at Sebastian's home in Switzerland earlier this past summer, and a few years ago I was over at Shamit Kemka's place in Delhi, and I had dinner at his home in Delhi. And it's amazing just the connections and the networks that you get to. Lee Prosenjek has stayed at my house. Like, you get to just stay. I went to Kendra Scott's wedding.
Wow.
Yeah, you get to kind of stay in contact with all these fun people. It's an amazing organization.
I really got to kind of reinvest getting back together and listening, hearing what's going on in everybody. I belong to my EO group that I belong to in New York has been together for 25 years. And that's amazing that we've had almost, 7 of the 9 guys who originally started in a group were all still together. And what's fascinating about it is seeing people's life journeys of entrepreneurship, because it's not a straight line going up.
No.
It's like a squirrel running around. A friend of mine, a good friend of mine, Dwight Cooper, told me that. He said your business doesn't grow like a hockey stick. What it does is it goes up, and then it goes a little bit down, and then it goes up, and then sometimes it crashes way down. And so does your life. As you know, a lot of times your life goes as your business goes. So, the thing about that I remember, Cameron, about when you were at Birthing at Giants, and even now, like, I really always pay attention to what you say, because not everybody comes to write about business ownership or entrepreneurship, one, from their own experience, and number 2 is something that's unique, something that's not being said. And so whenever I've read your books or seen you on TED or any of your videos or anything like that, I'm like, well, listen, he's saying something that somebody else, that most people aren't. And so I really pay attention. So this is our first podcast for the Entrepreneur MBA. And so you're the first person I thought of. Wow, and so I really appreciate you accepting the invitation to join us today.
Thank you. No, I'm happy to do this. It's weird. I think I'm a little bit on the spectrum for Tourette's. I'm not joking about that, because one of the things that happens when you have Tourette's is that you think out loud, and you don't really have an ability to have thoughts in your mind. They have to come out of your mouth for you to think them. And I think that maybe is why I'm kind of endearing on stage, is because I just say what comes out and I don't think through it. And I don't want that to come off as egotistical, because it's not. It's just I really, really like helping entrepreneurs, and I really see the shortcuts, and I feel bad when they're banging their head against the wall. And then at the same time, I just still feel like I'm a 16-year-old trapped in an adult body.
Yeah, it's funny you should say it, because I actually have dyslexia. So, for me, I have different challenges. But what's interesting is, I know you did a podcast once about the world should be teaching students about entrepreneurship. I think I read once that 60% of all entrepreneurs are dyslexic. So it's, I think we all have challenges. We all have something going on. That's the human journey, right?
Well, it's interesting. Like you mentioned earlier, the COO Alliance, and I know we're going to talk about it, but entrepreneurs, we do a lot of personality profiles of entrepreneurs, And then we also profile their COOs to learn the differences between the two. Most entrepreneurial CEOs, especially if you're in the kind of $1 to $20 million range or the $1 to $10 million range, like not the professionally hired CEO of a major Fortune 100, but the entrepreneurial CEOs, most are ADD, most are on the spectrum for bipolar disorder. And there's a lot of us that struggled with, I have dyscalculia, which is dyslexia, but with numbers. And we just didn't do great in the school system, and we didn't fit in the school system, and we didn't want to be in the school system, and we were kind of badgered to stay there, and we really didn't fit in. And then we really didn't fit working with other companies as well. So we kind of had to make our own way, but we also, when the medical community told us that ADD was a disorder, we realized it was a superpower, right? Like I call it attention disbursement. The fact that we see everything, that's not a disorder. That's a superpower in business. When you see what's happening with your customer, your market, your employees, the suppliers, the economy, the website, the data on spreadsheets jumps out at you. Those are really big strengths, but not if you're an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer. But you don't find a lot of engineers, doctors, and lawyers that are super inspiring, right?
Yep. Yeah. So that's a good transition. So you kind of touched upon, what an entrepreneur could, a lot of them are like. Let's talk at first about, we're going to jump ahead and then come back. Sure. And that is, let's talk about what a good person is who would match the criteria for a second in command, a COO type, somebody, start off by saying to me, at a company that's between 1 million and let's say 10 million, and the owner now is saying, you know what, I think it's a good idea to bring on a second in command. What should that entrepreneur be looking at?
Sure. So I'll really net it out in kind of layman's terms. The entrepreneur should make a list, two lists, a list of all the things they're really, really good at and that they love doing, and a second list of all the things they suck at and they hate doing. And they should hire a second in command who's really, really good at all the stuff that they suck at and hate doing, and who doesn't want to do the stuff the entrepreneur is great at. Okay, so you want to hire almost the yin and yang to you, right? Then the second part of it is really hiring somebody who you trust implicitly and who you really enjoy spending time with, because this is like your business spouse. And the trust has to be so strong day one that you would give them access to your bank accounts, your passwords, your kids, everything. So the reason that Brian and I, when we built 1-800-GOT-JUNK together, we were in Forum in EO together for 4 years before I joined him as his second in command. He was my best man at my wedding 3 months before I joined him as his second in command. And I'd already built 2 franchise companies, and he really didn't know what he was doing, but he had an amazing vision. So I got to come in and build his vision. He stayed out of the way and let me do that. But we were like nitroglycerin. When you put us together, we just built this really, really fast growing, amazing brand because we stayed in our lanes and loved hanging out together and trusted each other implicitly.
I think I remember you saying, and we actually didn't talk about your history, it's too long, but 1-800-GOT-JUNK is one of the key claims to fame that your career really exploded from. Is that accurate?
Reasonably, yeah. I had built 2 EO qualifying companies prior to that. One that we'd sold for $64 million, another one that's now about a $900 million collision repair chain. So I had gotten known for building 2 companies, but maybe not with the same press coverage that we had at 1-800-GOT-JUNK. But 7 years before I joined Brian, I hired Kimball Musk, Elon's brother, and I also hired their cousin, Peter Reeve, who built Solar City and trained them as entrepreneurs 7 years before I met Brian. So I'd already done it a couple times, but because of all the press coverage, we landed 5,200 stories about our company in 6 years. A lot of that press coverage became what kind of wrapped me as that CEO whisperer. It's certainly fair to say that it's the most well-known brand, but it wasn't the biggest.
Wow, I didn't realize the other ones were so big. And if I remember correctly, what you told me before, years ago, was what you see yourself as enabling the entrepreneur to do what he or she does best.
Yeah, like I look at, See, I was raised as an entrepreneur, right? I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My dad was an entrepreneur. Both my grandfathers were. My father raised my brother and sister and I to all be entrepreneurs. My sister has gone through the Birthing of Giants program. She was a graduate of the 2013 class. So that's all I know. I don't understand people with jobs. So my whole world has been seeing these entrepreneurs almost like a fly trying to bang their head against the window. And if they try harder, they'll get out the window. But I was the dumb kid. So I had to find the cheat sheets. I had to find the path of least resistance. And I think because of building these companies quickly and building a lot of franchise companies, I've been able to spot systems that are really easy to put in place. And those are the ones I try to give entrepreneurs.
So going back to, we make this list. These are the things I like to do. These are the things I don't like to do. So I'll tell you a funny story, Cameron.
Let me give you a really specific example on this. So
yeah, please.
Think of a company today like Shopify, right? Shopify is a company that we've all heard of. It's an internet enabling company that helps small businesses sell online. They've got a couple $100 billion valuation today. No one has really ever heard of their CEO, Tobias. Most people in the media know of Harley, who is their COO. Harley Finkelstein is very outward facing, very business development, very sales, very marketing, very PR. Their CEO, Tobias, is very inward facing, very product, very engineering, very kind of level 5 leader. So in that world, that's their yin and yang. Is Tobias wants to stay focused inside, Harley stays focused outside. If you flip that to another company like a 1-800-GOT-JUNK today, $400 million company, Brian is very outward facing as CEO. He's very PR, writing books, doing speaking, culture, brand. Whereas Eric Church, who I've known for 30 years, is their new COO. Eric, no one would ever heard of Eric because Eric is very inward facing, very focused on operations. So those are two very good companies that have very different CEO, COO dynamics. What they have in common is each of them stay in their lane, each of them work on what they're great at, and they have huge trust and connection with each other. But in one case, it's the COO looking out. In the other case, it's the COO looking in. In one case, it's the CEO looking out. In the other case, CEO looking in.
Yeah. So, I'm sure you remember Michael Gerber, right?
Yeah.
In the entrepreneur world, Michael Gerber is famous for this one saying, at least I think he was or is, and that is,
work on it.
You should work on your business, not in your business.
Michael walked into 1-800-GOT-JUNK one day in 2004 and met Brian and I, and he stopped at the front door wearing his famous white fedora, and he looked at both of us, looked around and smiled, and he said, "I didn't think people actually did what I wrote about in my books."
Well, you know what? Let me tell you a funny story, and that is I hired his second in command as a coach.
Whoa.
And so, I kind of know that I'm not going to say, but I know the ins and outs of the way Michael ran his organization. But she was with me for 10 years as a coach.
Wow.
And she was very, very good. And so, I actually took your advice. I had a company that had reached about $4 million in size, and we had gotten there in 3 years. So I heard you kind of, preach, you should have a second in command. And at the time, this is 20 years ago. So I actually went out and brought somebody. I hired someone to be the second in command. And, it was the right move, but I just didn't have enough for him to do.
Right.
And, it ended up not working out. He was with me for a year. And it was the right move, but I don't know if it was the wrong person, the wrong time, that we weren't in the right size. Now, I certainly didn't make a list and say, this is what I'm going to be doing.
Did you have an executive assistant when you hired him?
No. And that's what I should have. Yeah. Looking back at it, what I learned later on, because there was other things that I did for some of the companies I had when I wanted to bring on a second in command, I should have hired a personal assistant. Yeah. I think that would have been better. That's great.
That's what I tell everyone today is that, I use the old Jack Daly saying that if you don't have an executive assistant, you are one. And you need to, before you hire a second in command, hire an EA who can get 50% of your admin off your plate it frees you up for at least another year before you truly need to hire a second in command. You know what
Yeah.
most entrepreneurs are doing when they're trying to hire a second in command is free up time. But then what they end up doing is giving some of the big projects off, and then you got the CEO still doing admin work instead of the CEO getting rid of their email, getting rid of their calendaring, getting rid of their admin, getting rid of all the miscellaneous. Like, I don't even check in for my own flights. My EA checks in for it, and a boarding pass hits my phone. So there's all the things that you can get off your place first, and then hire the second in command later.
Yeah, you don't also have to hire that executive assistant full time
No, you
either.
can have fractional, part-time. Mine started 20 hours a week. She's full-time now. I even have a second one that works in our company now for a team. But yeah, they don't have to be full-time. They just have to be taking stuff off your plate to free up your unique ability.
I just find with so many entrepreneurs that are in that under $5 million range that they get caught up in doing things that either they like or that they think they should be doing, and they're not willing to make the transition. So I'll give you an example. A lot of entrepreneurs under 5 million, they still are doing their own books.
Yeah, it's insane.
And, and then they sit there and they say, well, I want to be in control of it. Or, I don't want to give it to somebody else. I don't trust them. And I think sometimes you have to buy into the idea that, are you really working on your business or working in your business?
Well, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't sit down and say, if I was sick and I only had 2 hours per day to work, what would those couple of tasks be that I would work on today? What would my unique ability be? And imagine if you only worked on the stuff that would give you that highest leverage, and you outsourced everything except genius.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good advice, So when you go into companies, well, let's talk about the COO Alliance.
Sure.
What do you see mostly in the personalities of the people who make good COO to me.
Command. Yeah,
second in command.
You touched on something really important. I'm going to answer this one first. Be very careful with giving away big titles. So your second in command might be a COO, but it might also be a VP operations. It might be a director of operations. It might be a general manager. It might be operations manager. Really be careful. It's the same as your controller. Could be a controller or a finance manager or a director of finance or a VP of finance or a CFO. Be very careful with giving away big titles, because you might not think it matters, but the employee starts to compare their compensation against what others in that same job title get paid. They also compare what the roles and responsibilities of others with that same job title are. And then people inside and outside the company have different expectations of what that person's role really is. So titles really do matter, and be very careful with giving them away. So I think you're correct in calling it, what do you do when you have that second in command? In fact, I even started a podcast called the Second in Command Podcast, where we interview the second in command, not necessarily the COO title. So then your question was, what makes a good second in command? I guess the first thing that makes a really good second in command is someone who realizes that their role is to make the CEO iconic. Their role is to be there to make the CEO look good and to grow the CEO's vision, grow the CEO's company. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, what makes a really good COO is someone who's really good at communicating with an entrepreneurial type. Most entrepreneurs are quick starts. They act, they act now, they plan later, right? It's like fire, ready, aim. They make it up as they go. They're shooting from the hip. They're winging it. They don't exactly quote facts. They quote kind of averages. They have to be really good at working with that type. And they have to kind of speak in bullet points and speak in executive summaries and realize that the entrepreneur just wants the bottom line. They don't need all the details. What also makes a really good second in command is someone who asks enough questions to really understand what the CEO wants, so they can then go and execute on it without having to go back multiple times. And then secondly, someone who puts really good systems in place, or ensures that we have really good systems in place to scale, because when you systemize things, that's where you can replicate and grow faster, right? It's all about that scale. So I think that would be the key.
Yeah, the thing that I noticed too, like with a lot of entrepreneurs, especially myself, we're typically terrible managers, and I found that, the second in command is someone who has to be pretty good with people.
Right. Well, and I'm glad you actually just switched from saying really good as a manager to really good with people, because ideally the second in command would be really good at putting systems in place that would attract really good A and B players so that you don't need to manage anybody, that they manage themselves, right? You hire self-managing people, you align them with this vivid vision of where you're going and what you're building, and then you get out of their way and you support them.
Well, that's going to be another podcast, how to hire right, right? Because the funny thing is, a lot of this stuff goes away when you hire the right people.
Yeah.
And let's be clear, you don't just hire the right people. You have detailed job descriptions, you have detailed measurements, you have detailed processes in place. It's not just, well, I hire the best people and then let them figure everything else out themselves. But that's going to be a whole nother podcast, of course.
And just on that, I'm kind of getting tired of people saying that they have an A-level team. No, you don't. You probably have a couple of A's and a whole bunch of B's and a few C's, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. But A players are racehorses, B players are workhorses, C players have to go to the glue factory. Most companies should only have 20 or 25% of their team are A's, and then the rest are really solid B's. That's okay. But stop pretending to yourself that you have an A-level team, because if we sat down over a beer and scratched the surface, I can almost guarantee you that you don't have A's, which is, we can learn how to get A's, but don't fool yourself in thinking you've got an A-level team when you've got a solid stable of B's. And it's kind of like the bad news bears. You take a whole group of people that are solid B's, if you align them with vision and you get them culturally figured out, they can actually do some big things together.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that also when you're under 5 million, let's just face it, you're just not going to get a lot of A players.
Right.
You just can't afford them. Right. So you get a B team or a C team, and you coach them up.
Yeah. And as long as you align them and coach them, you're in good shape. But I think that's what's important is people to realize, don't pretend you have A's, because if you think you have A's, you're not going to be coaching them. You're not going to be leading them. You're not going to be that chief energizing officer and inspiring them. You think that they're going to be able to do more than they want, and then you get frustrated that they're not. But if you realize they're solid B's, then you approach it differently.
Yeah. So, going back to the title too, I'll tell you something that I did, because I had learned my lesson with the first person of hiring a second in command. And then, so I had my third company was a company called healthcareseeker.com. And we went through incredible.
That's the one I knew you running.
Yeah. Well, I think I was transitioning from expertseeker.com to healthcareseeker.com.
Okay.
And they were actually being run together at the same time. And so what I learned, which really was actually a really good idea, we had gone from 1 million to 3 million to 5 million to 7 million and in 4 years. And that was a Inc. 500, fastest growing. And then, so I had gone from, 3 employees to 28, over that time frame. And when we went to the 28, what I decided to do was have team captains. And so what I did was I took each group that we had, sales, recruiting, and HR, and I identified what I thought was my best person there. And I then gave them an extra $5,000 a year to be a team captain.
Great.
And I tell you, I loved the people that worked at healthcareseeker.com. They were great people. I really enjoyed working with them. And that was these people felt they were, my team captains felt they were part of something special. And and then we started to put KPIs in place. So as a team, we saw how the company was doing, so that they saw that as the company continued to grow, that they were going to be a bigger part of it.
Yeah. And putting those metrics in place is so important, because employees want to see that what they're working on is actually having results, right?
Yeah. Until, believe it or not, though, it backfired, because we went through the 2008 recession. And our industry went from a $13 billion industry to a $7 billion industry. And when the team started seeing over a recession of 2 years, 3 years, and longer, the KPIs, they started getting, it was challenging to keep them excited.
Right.
I'll tell you,
For sure.
That's a different story. But but I thought the idea of having a team captain allows you to not have to pay, $50, $70, $100,000 for somebody. I think the executive assistant is a good idea, but it allows you to make that transition before you hire someone full time.
Yeah.
So what else do you see when you're hiring a second in command, or when what else do you think is important to do?
One is to make sure that you remember that when you're hiring a true A or a really solid B plus second in command, they're going to do just great in their job. They'll be fine. When you onboard them, your job is to think of them like a big, huge boulder that you're dropping into a pond. And that boulder that you're dropping into a pond is going to have these ripples that they're going to cause. And there's going to be a lot of good ripple effects. There's going to be a lot of bad ripple effects. But a boulder creates ripples, right? If you're so worried about making sure the boulder gets to the bottom of the pond, which is their job, you're gonna miss all the ripples. Your core job as CEO is to watch for all of the ripple effects that are happening with your customers, your suppliers, your employees, your systems, the leadership team. Watch for all those ripples. Like, make sure that you're spending time with the team, that you're out of the office, that you're listening and watching, and that's where your ADD kicks in really nicely. Is if you let it flow, you'll notice all the stuff that starts to happen, and then you can be there to kind of behind the scenes work with the COO to help them clean it up or to help them be aware of it. Or you can kind of cover their ass with the team and go, hey, yeah, I know he's doing this stuff, but he's supposed to, or yeah, I know she's done these things or made these decisions, but she's supposed to. Your job as CEO is to watch for all the unintended ripple effects.
So I want to give you two scenarios, Cameron. You tell me the issues and what your thoughts are on it. You have one situation where you decide to bring someone from the outside to be your second in command. And then you have another scenario where you decide to to bring somebody who's already in your organization to second in command. So could you tell me a little bit about the ripples and stuff that you'll see with both of those?
Yeah. What was the second one?
You promote somebody from within.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Harvard wrote an article 15 years ago called "The Misunderstood Role of the COO." And when they wrote this article, they identified that there's just different types of COOs that come into an organization than we might expect. And so one is kind of that, you promote someone from within and you're trying to grow them. You might be doing it because you're trying to handcuff that person, or you might be doing it because you want to give them more responsibility, or because you're trying to work on your own areas of unique ability and get some of that stuff off your plate. But that's a very different reason from hiring, let's say, an outside COO that you bring in who might have more capacity. They might have more skill set. Maybe they're coming in to do a turnaround. Maybe they're coming in to do M&A or acquisitions that you just don't have the talent for internally. Or you might have somebody who is more of the heir apparent, somebody who's coming into a company that you need to take over for you. Or you might have somebody who you need to just execute on your vision more than what you're doing. Or you might be promoting somebody who's more of a change agent in the company, and they really have to radically pivot the organization. So it's actually more than just the two types. It's more than just the promote from within and the bring in the external. They identified 7 different distinct types of second in command.
What do you think mostly small businesses promote from within?
No, I've seen more small businesses. Now, Vern and I agree on this. Vern Harnish, who started the Entrepreneurs Organization, started Birthing a Giants, which is now called the Entrepreneur Masters Program. He runs his Scaling Up program and Gazelle's coaching. We agree that if you're a technology-based or an engineering-based or have a lot of IP, it's very important to try to promote your second in command from within if you can. But if you're a business that doesn't really rely on a lot of industry specific knowledge, you can hire from that outside. So as an example, I came in to 1-800-GOT-JUNK as an outside person, but I'd already done it twice, right? 3 times, really. I built 3 companies. I built 2 franchise companies. What Brian needed was someone to build the franchise company for him. Whereas in other cases, let's say you are an engineering firm, you probably want somebody who's been in your firm to kind of continue to grow up around all those engineers that you have to work with, if you can. It's harder to bring them from the outside world and have them learn that IP.
I guess it's based on that list that you make of things that you're good at, things you're not good at. I guess the third column on that list is things that you think you need.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. I think it is more based on what the lists are.
I would assume that, sometimes when you're in your own head so long, it's hard for you it's impossible to be objective. It's probably a good idea to maybe share that list with somebody. Sure. To say, this is what I'm thinking. Do you think you should do that with someone really well?
In terms of recruiting someone to bring them into the company?
No, going over that list and say, I'm thinking of bringing on a second in command, or I think I need.
I would do it with your team. I would do it with your employees. Sit down with your employees and say, at the end of the day, if you're going to bring in a second in command into the organization, you need to create a scorecard for what you're recruiting. Sit down and create, here are the 5 major projects this person needs to be able to do in the first 12 months. Here's the kind of behavioral traits I want them to have, or the kind of qualities that I want them to have. And you create kind of a 1-page scorecard for that role. Show that to your team, and they'll realize 2 things. One, they'll be like, whoa, you're hiring somebody really cool. This is exciting because we know you suck at all that stuff, which is really good, right? You're stating the obvious. And then second, they also realize that no one internally has that skill or those skills. When they read the scorecard, they'll be like, yeah, you know what? This needs to be an external. Or they'll be like, hey, you know what? Have you thought about Bob? Because Bob's pretty darn close to all this. And you might not have seen that internal person that they saw. So it's interesting. Like at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, I was brought in originally to coach Brian and run operations. And then the leadership team all kept pointing to me as second in command. So Brian appointed me COO. But it was really the internal team saw me as the only one that could really knew what we were doing or where we were going. They could execute, but I was the one that had the vision on how to pull it all together.
I love that idea. Because you know what, you then get buy-in from your staff.
Well, they're going to have to work with the person, right? You may as well make it part of the recruiting and interviewing process.
It's amazing too, is that whenever I feel like I push things back, and if I think, I can't think of an example off the top of my head when I've done something like that. I'm always amazed at how good the answers that the people who are working for me come back with. Mm-hmm. When you're sitting, at this president level or CEO or founder level, I don't ask my people enough about their input or their insight. And I think now looking back, I think about so many different times when they came up with the idea.
Well, at the end of the day, this is where if you flip your org chart so that it's upside down from normal, so the CEO is at the bottom, supporting the VPs who are supporting the managers who are supporting the customers. So the org chart now goes bottom up, okay? So you got the CEO, and above them are the VPs, above them are the managers, above them are the customers or the staff. Your job isn't to tell everybody what to do. It's to show them where we're going and to help them figure out how to get there. So our job as CEO isn't to have all the good ideas. It's to have the vision and to help get the team to figure out the ideas, to help get the team to figure out the plan.
Yeah, I think I always did that naturally anyway, just because I always wanted to get buy-in. And so I would often let the people who were working for me come up with the ideas, because I knew if it was their idea that they would have the buy-in. I might have already been thinking of that, but by getting their ideas out in the open, and sometimes my idea would change, I felt that they would be better executing because it was their idea.
Well, this is going to seem weird, but I learned that from when I was about 4 years old, and I was growing up in this household where we celebrated Christmas, and my parents had me write a letter to Santa Claus. So I wrote a letter to Santa Claus, and I, went with my mom, and we mailed the letter, and sure enough, like 6 weeks later, I look under the tree, and whoa, like so many things that I had on my list are under the tree. Like Santa's magical. No, Santa's not magical. My mom read the letter. So if you really want to know how to build a great company, ask your employees what would make this a great company. If you really want employees to get engaged on all the projects they're going to have to work on, come up with a whole list of projects together, them and you, that could drive the company's goals. Have the employees vote on which projects are going to have the highest impact and the easiest to put in place, and then have them work on the projects that they picked and they voted on. You don't have to sell them on it at all. They picked them. They created them.
Yeah, it's a great idea. It's great. So we have a couple of minutes left, and let's what else? Is there anything else that you think? I know there's tons of stuff, and I noticed your podcast you do for. Is it called the CEO Alliance? That podcast?
No, it's called the Second in Command Podcast, and then it's called the COO Alliance. Is the group we kind of started like the EO or YPO for Second in Commands. The Second in Command Podcast. Everyone interviews the entrepreneur. And as an example, if you interviewed Brian at 1-800-GOT-JUNK and you asked him how we grew the company, he would have a very true story. And if you asked me, how did you grow 1-800-GOT-JUNK? I would have a very true story. They'd be different though, but both very accurate. So I've always heard these entrepreneurs getting interviewed, as an example, Kendra Scott, who we both know, and Kendra built this amazing jewelry brand. Well, I've met her COO, Lon, and if you asked Lon, how did you grow Kendra Scott Jewelry? He would have a very different story than Kendra, and they'd both be true. I want Lon's story now, because we've heard Kendra's story enough. I kind of want the rest of the story.
Yeah, I was surprised when I looked at it how many episodes you've had on it. I mean, you've had it was over 50.
Yeah,
right?
I think we're at 76 or 77 right now.
Yeah. I was like, that's great, and what a great niche. I don't think anybody's doing Second in Command podcasts or, the CEO Alliance. It was a really, and it fits right in your wheelhouse too. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. And it's consistent with like my core purpose is helping entrepreneurs make their dreams happen. So as long as I'm helping entrepreneurs make their dreams happen, it works. So running the COO Alliance, growing the COOs helps entrepreneurs grow their companies, right? I've always wondered, why are we teaching the entrepreneur how to do stuff? We should teach the entrepreneur what needs to happen. We should teach their second in command how to do it.
Fair enough. So let's summarize some of the ideas that we've talked about today. And the first one I'm just going to start off with is just, as an entrepreneur, you got to make a commitment that you want to work on your business and not in your business. Now, the second thing that Cameron has said to us today is then once you've made that commitment, you probably have to make a list of the things that you do on a daily or weekly basis. And then the third thing you need to do is kind of to separate two columns and say, okay, these are the things that I think I'm good at, and these are the things that I'm not good at. Right, Cameron?
Yeah, in addition to that, on that same list, the stuff that I love doing and the stuff that I don't love doing, because you might be really good at it, but not get any energy from it. Get it off your plate. When we were building Boyd Auto Body and Gerber Auto Collision, my CEO, Terry, used to complain about having to do investor relations and deal with the public markets and deal with the investment bankers. I'm like, then don't fucking do it. Have Brock do it. Have our CFO handle it. Like, you're the CEO. And he started laughing. He's like, oh God, you're right. Like, just because other public companies have the CEO, why am I doing it? I'm like, I don't know. You get to rig the rules in your own favor. So it's all about building that unique ability team and getting everything off your plate that doesn't give you energy that you're not great at, and hiring people who love doing that stuff. The one thing we didn't touch on that we should touch on related to the COO or the second in command and the CEO is how to really keep the trust strong and the relationship strong. So I just take all the same ideas from a marriage, with the exception of sex. It's having a date night, right? Having time to get out of the office together once a week, having a really open, pure, radical candor and radical trust and radical honesty with each other. and having really good debates and arguments, but not with the kids around. So the COO and CEO need to be able to have a space and time to argue and debate each other without the rest of the leadership team seeing it, without the board seeing it, without the employees seeing it, so that they can come back and be that force together. And that's a really, really powerful thing that nobody really talks about, is they need to have their safe space to be able to really build and grow and have that healthy conflict, kind of like the 5 dysfunctions of a team that Pat Lencioni covered in his book.
Yeah, good point. So then I guess once you've made that list, the next probably step is that certainly to share your ideas with somebody else that you respect and say, this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking maybe to either, hire someone within or to hire, someone out from the outside. This is what they would do. This is what I'm thinking, just to, test your assumptions and your understanding. So after you do that, again, you can look internally, you could speak with your team, get their input, see what they think. I guess the next step after that would be to execute it, right?
Yeah, it's you reverse engineer the plan, much like building a home, right? You have the vision for what you're building, you create the blueprints and the plan to build the home, and then you figure out what are the things that are on the foundation that you build first, and then put up the walls and put in the electrical and the plumbing. Most entrepreneurs get distracted and they want to put in the wolf stove and the cabinets on day one. It's like, wait. Don't get distracted by that big shiny object. Let's get all the foundational things in the company first. So the people systems, the core values, the core purpose, the interviewing systems, the onboarding systems, the training programs, the strategic thinking, the goal setting, the meeting rhythms. You kind of build that stuff so it becomes very foundational. And that allows you to then replicate and to grow faster and to grow faster.
Yeah, and there's so much more to it after that. And I think probably the best advice we could give our listeners is once you do hire that second in command or promote somebody from within, turn them on to your second in command podcast.
Yeah, well, the second in command podcast is a great resource for sure for the second in command, but also even for the entrepreneur and business leaders. Because it gives you some insights into how companies really got built. We've got the second in command for the Cleveland Indians, from Bumble, from Shopify, from just some amazing brands that they're giving you the inside scoop that we don't often hear about the how. We hear about more along the vision and the biz dev stuff, but we don't hear about the inner guts of it.
Great. All right. Well, that's what that's the time that we have for today in today's podcast. I would like to thank so very much Cameron for coming on today's podcast. If you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. And of course, if you're looking for a line of credit for your business, you can call us at 862-207-4118 or visit our website at FS, as in Financing Solutions, creditline.com. Cameron, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how can they reach you?
Yeah, I think all of my books are available on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes. And then the Second in Command podcast is probably great as well. And then they'll find me on all the social media platforms if they just search my name.
Great. And so I just want to thank all our listeners. And remember to, as an entrepreneur, it's just always just keep getting better at what you do.